In this video, I'm going to break down 8 qualities that you should be looking for when hiring a high-impact head of growth. For those who aren't familiar with me, my name is Andrew Kaplan. I'm actually a former head of growth for 2 different high-volume product-led SaaS businesses. And about 3.5 years ago, I decided to step off of the startup hamster wheel and build my own business. And since then, I have coached and mentored about 50 different people who work on or around cross-functional growth teams. So needless to say, I know a fair bit about these roles and their challenges and what you need to be successful. And in this video, I'm going to break down 8 of those qualities that you should be looking for when hiring someone to lead your growth team. Or conversely, if you're someone who's working in growth, looking for a new job, these are going to be 8 qualities that I would be looking to highlight in your resume, in your cover letter, or during the interview process. Now, it's no secret. The hiring market for everybody in SaaS has slowed down quite a bit over the last 16 to 18 months. But the job market for the growth community in growth roles is still pretty strong. And for what it's worth, this is not just my opinion. Lenny Rachatsky of Lenny's newsletter recently published an article exploring some data, which highlighted that growth roles were the fastest growing roles since 2022, growing way faster than marketing and sales jobs. Now, this is obviously some great news for the growth community, but on the other side of the equation, hiring a head of growth is getting even harder. Now, it's fair to point out that some companies probably shouldn't hire someone to work in growth at all, right? If you're a really early stage company and you don't have product market fit, hiring someone to lead your growth team is probably not the right move at this point. And even if you do have product market fit, growth is still such a new capability that most companies have no idea what to look for. And in my experience, what most people get wrong is they look for someone who can work in growth, meaning they go really, really deep on finding someone who understands all of the tools, all of the tactics, who knows the quantitative and conversion rates, up, down, and sideways. But in my experience, growth tools and tactics are constantly evolving. So if you lean on someone who knows those too much, you might end up with the wrong person. And the truth is, you want someone to lead your growth capability, not just someone who works on the growth team. So technical skills are about half of the job. So without further ado, let's talk about the 8 non-technical traits that you should look for in your growth leader. Okay, the first trait we're going to talk about is someone who obsesses over helping your users. At its core, working in growth is not about the conversion rates or the spreadsheets or the technical analysis or the statistical significance. Those are all tools to understand if you're helping real people solving real problems using your product. You want someone who understands that and is passionate about that, right? Not someone who's just passionate about the statistical significance and the quantitative analysis. Someone who understands the best way to influence user behavior and move all those charts up and to the right is by learning what is most valued to your users and then finding creative ways to deliver that value again and again and again. That is the best way to help people. As a side note, that's actually why I named my business Delivering Value, to remind myself of that mission, because that's what I'm passionate about. It's not just leveraging hacks and shortcuts. It's by finding the core root of what is most valuable to your ICP and then helping them experience that value. The second is finding someone who is low ego. Here's why. Working in growth is incredibly humbling. Even if you are insanely gifted at your craft and you're running lots of experiments, you're only probably winning 1 out of every 4 experiments, maybe 1 out of every 3 experiments if you're lucky. You need to find folks who don't claim to know the right answer and admit that many of the previous playbooks that they ran were probably contextual and made sense for their last company, with their last audience, with their last growth model, with their last conversion rates and all of that stuff. You want to be wary of anyone who's like over eager or over committed to running a previous playbook. You need someone who's excited to figure out the playbook at this new company and doesn't assume that they already have the right answer. The third is going to be finding someone who focuses on the process to finding the right answer and doesn't assume that they have the right answer. This is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. Experienced growth leaders know that success in one environment doesn't always lead to success in another environment. And so rather than being right or assuming that they already have the right answer, what they do instead is focus on deeply understanding the problem, then getting lots of creative ideas from other smart and creative folks to solve that problem, and then essentially running a process of brainstorming and prioritization and experimentation to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and then sharing those learnings with other teams so they can spread whatever intel they've gotten and maximize the output. So the best growth leaders focus on that process and amazing inputs to that process, knowing that that's going to lead them to the right answer versus assuming that they already have it. The fourth is going to be someone who loves finding opportunities, right? These growth roles, they tend to have a wide amount of ownership at many SaaS companies, and inexperienced growth leaders tend to spend their time trying to move every metric. In my coaching practice, when I talk to brand new heads of growth and I ask them what they're working on, they'll say I'm working on acquisition and activation and increasing my conversion rate from free to paid and decreasing churn. And when I talk to VPs of growth and people who have been in the game a little bit longer, typically they'll say I'm focused on one or two levers at a time, usually two maximum. And so to be a successful growth leader, you need to, one, understand that you can only take on a certain number of opportunities at a time. And then two, become addicted to the process of finding those opportunities, right? Someone who understands how to create a growth model, to zoom out and can review that model holistically, and then can zoom in to the channels, segments, programs, milestones, etc., to understand that problem in excruciating detail. That leads them to figuring out the right problems to solve, and then eventually getting them the right inputs to run the process to figure out the right answer. So you need someone who loves that process of zooming out, analyzing the model, zooming in, figuring out exactly where the opportunities are. That skill set is one of the most valuable. The fifth is someone who is data-driven, but not just the quant stuff. I know the quantitative gets a ton of love and attention in the growth space, and it makes sense, right? Working in growth, it is a discipline that requires a ton of information to make decisions, and data is a valuable currency to make those decisions. But many growth leaders who I meet over-index on the quantitative data and undervalue the qualitative. They lean heavy on the charts, the spreadsheets, the funnels in their approach, but they overlook the stories, the people, and the feedback behind the numbers. And many of the most successful growth programs and experiments have come from comments that my team has heard from customers or user recordings that we got from our user research. And so a successful growth leader knows that people use their software, not just spreadsheets. Obviously, the spreadsheets help you understand if you've solved these problems and if you've delivered value at scale, but you need someone who values both types of data, quant and qualitative. The sixth trait to look for is someone who understands their biggest threat is likely misalignment. Because growth is such a new capability, most companies have never had somebody leading growth and focus on growth full time. And if you're not careful, this can lead to total misunderstandings around what growth is, what this person should be focused on, how they go about their work and what their operating should look like, how they collaborate with other teams, what metrics they should have ownership over. And so if you're not careful, this miscommunication can cause misalignment and all kinds of bad stuff in the long run. And so finding someone who understands this and prioritizes communication and collaboration with their execs and cross-functional stakeholders is going to ensure that they're successful for the long run. The seventh is kind of building off of that last one, someone who works well cross-functionally. So for your growth team to have a large impact, they're going to have to work effectively across departments and across teams. And so a successful growth team has designated designers, engineers, maybe some marketers on there, and people who are collaborating daily with other teams like product management, probably the core marketing team, maybe business intelligence. Most of those teams have specific ways that they prefer to work. They don't all work the same. They use different tools. They have different project management tools. They have different meeting cadences if they're doing stand-ups or Monday planning meetings or processes, tools, Slack channels. And so your growth team needs to learn how to thrive within these nuances. They need to understand the existing company operating system, be able to slide seamlessly into that operating system so that they can be effective. The eighth is someone who can organize all of the ideas into their head. The eighth is someone who can organize all of those ideas swirling around in their brain into a small number of priorities, strategy, and a roadmap. And this is the main thing that I see from folks who are new heads of growth compared to folks who are much more experienced. The new heads of growth, when I ask to see their strategy, it's typically a long list of projects they're working on. Versus a more experienced head of growth has got a have a high level goal, a small number of levers they're looking to pull to achieve that goal, and then have brainstormed projects, programs, experiments, ideas that ladder up to those levers and ultimately to help them achieve those goals. So finding someone who can organize all of this stuff swirling around in their brain into a strategy is incredibly important and is a skill that only comes with time, practice, and a lot of feedback. You want someone who can do that from the jump, and so you want to look into examples of that skill set. Now, the ninth, I know I said I was going to share an 8, but I'm going to share one bonus one because at some companies, this can be a huge challenge. It was for me in my journey. Your growth leader needs to be able to motivate engineers. I say engineers specifically because to work on a growth team and to work specifically on product-led growth, you need to have product resources. You need to have builders. You need to have the authority to make product changes. You need to have developers who can actually do the lifting and code writing to make those changes. The challenge is that not every engineer likes working in growth. And that's because you might have a relatively small amount of code change that could create a massive amount of company impact. And so you need to find engineers who are motivated by business impact, almost engineers who think about themselves as a founder, as a builder, as a future company creator themselves, and not someone who's only motivated by shipping the most amazing and complex code. And so you need to find the right types of engineers, and even when you have them, you need to constantly be motivating them to keep them engaged in the work and keep everything moving in the right direction. Now, the main thing to keep in mind is that finding someone to lead your growth team is really no different than many other leadership positions. When you graduate into the leadership level of the org, really your job is a communication, alignment, resource allocation, and negotiation job, and less so the job of actually being the best person working within your capability. And for whatever reason, I think because the growth space is still new, I find this flip-flopped for whatever reason. Every time I see companies that are looking to hire an amazing growth leader, they're typically looking for a really experienced IC. At least that's how all the job descriptions that I see are written. And on the flip side, what I have learned is that your team, the growth team, should be made up of those people. But your head of growth should be someone who can articulate what the growth team is working on, why they're working on those things, what the operating system looks like, and then be an amazing cross-functional collaborator for the rest of your leadership team. If you need help, if you're a new head of growth looking for help, I just created another video detailing the exact way I would spend my first 90 days, or conversely, if you are hiring someone to lead your growth team, please show them my video. It details exactly how they can get off to a fast start. And of course, if you need one-on-one support, deliveringvalue.co/coaching is how you can reach out to potentially get some one-on-one support from me.